We'll also talk about that latest blog article you had about being able to smell pappy or make a pappy snow strip.
It would be very helpful to me if we could go through this without using the phrase smell pappy.
I'm down for that.
On today's podcast, we have Tom Johnson and Robert Mohr of Aroma Academy, who are going to be talking about sensory training for bourbon. We're back with another episode of the Bourbon Pursuit podcast. My name is Kenny, and as always, I have Ryan here with me. Ryan, how was your Thanksgiving?
Good, man. I'm still recovering of all the bloated and salty bourbon and food and bourbon. I'm just recovering, but feeling good. It was awesome to see family open some really good bottles. And
So what bottles did you open?
Well, I got a Michter's Toasted, a new release, actually on Wednesday, got that. So we opened that. And then opened some Weller 12 175s I've been holding on to. And then some El Bertilli. Nothing crazy, but stuff I've just been holding on to till I got a couple extras and then shared them with the family or whatever.
Yeah, I was kind of in the same boat. I went up to Ohio, and most of my family is actually from Ohio. And if anybody out there, they may not know it, but from what I hear on all through the tales of Twitter and everything like that, is Ohio is just a wasteland for bourbon. And so I brought up some of the bottles that I already had opened. So I brought up one of my Lot Bs and Weller 12 and some Willet and stuff like that. And they were going crazy. And of course, they see the Lot B and they're like, I've got to try the Pappy. I've got to figure out what Pappy's all about. Yada, yada, yada. And then I didn't want to be like, no, this isn't technically Pappy. I didn't want to get into that whole
and then
nonsense.
They're disappointed.
Yeah. I didn't want to get that whole nonsense with them. But, I didn't want to, I didn't really break out any new bottles. I actually just started organizing everything. I had to take everything. I've got 6 boxes full of bottles in the basement that I've been storing, and I took all the open ones out of there and finally put them on my actual liquor shelf in my dining room. So now I actually have an organized way of knowing what bottles I have open and what bottles I don't. So at least I have that going for me right now.
That is nice. And yeah, it's funny you say that about the Lot B. I brought mine as well. And out of all the bottles, everybody in my family really loved the Elmer T. Lee. And I'm like, well, that's only $40 and you can find it typically, 2 or 3 times a year. So it just shows you that you don't have to go for that Pappy to get the most bang for your buck.
Mm-hmm. And we kind of talked about, I said I have a bunch of bourbon bottles in my basement. I did some research on this, and there's always a lot of questions that come up on forums, and people say, if you have an extensive bourbon collection, or even whiskey collection, or even spirits collection for that matter, how do you store it? What's the best way? And one of the things that is very prevalent is that it's not the same as storing wine. So of course it's sort of like wine, you want to stay away from high temperatures because, if anybody knows this, especially here in Kentucky, if you go shopping in the midsummer and you go to the liquor store and you put a bottle of bourbon in your trunk and then you go into the office for a few hours, you might find out.
It'll be about 110 degrees.
Yeah. You're going to find out that the cork actually popped off the bottle because, all that stuff, it expands and it can actually pop it out. Right. So you end up with some damaged stuff in your car. But for extended periods, it can actually dry out the cork if you do that. So every once in a while you got to go and you got to flip the bottles upside down. You got to get those corks a little bit wet. The other thing is with bourbon bottles, you have to store them in an upright location. You can't put them on their sides, right? Because the thing is that the alcohol in the bourbon can eat away at the corks. And I actually found that one out firsthand. So I've got an old Jim Beam decanter that's a Model T. And the actual opening for it is kind of on the trunk or the rear of the car. And so all the bourbon was sitting up against the edge of the car. And the cork has completely evaporated into the bourbon, right? So those are one of the things that you have to understand. And, some people talked about temperatures. Always sunlight and heat are the enemies. 56 degrees is a really good place to keep it, store it upright because it's just one of those things that, you don't want to have it too cold because the fats will separate and stuff like that. So.
Wow, I didn't know it could be so advanced. Mine just sits in the basement and seems to do just fine.
That's what mine's in the basement too. But I guess there are ways that people go crazy about getting humidity levels to a perfect way and stuff like that, and making sure. But again, my bourbon collection isn't near extensive as some of these pictures that I see, but still, I guess it's one of the things you have to take into consideration if you want to make sure your investment isn't going to go bad.
Absolutely. I agree. Yeah. So why don't we talk about today's show? I think I'm pretty excited about it. I first, with wine, really liked smelling wine, and obviously a good part of drinking bourbon is doing all the aromas and smelling it. I don't know exactly what I'm smelling, and so I'm excited to talk to these guys to kind of steer me in a direction. I just know if something smells hot or you know, it's got the caramel or vanilla aromas and stuff, but I think this will be a really cool show for our listeners.
I think so too, because I'm in the same boat with you, right? I smell something and I'm like, well, it smells like bourbon. I guess we can probably drink it, right?
Right, you're right.
So let's go ahead and we'll introduce our guests. So today we have Tom Johnson and Robert Mohr of Aroma Academy. So fellas, welcome to the show.
Nice to be here.
Thanks, Kenny.
Yes. So let's go ahead. We'll let each of you kind of just go ahead and give us a quick intro of first about who you are and how you got into bourbon in the first place.
Tom, you want to go first?
I'm started out as a writer and have become kind of an entrepreneur. Robert and I have been involved in a couple of startups together. I came to bourbon actually through wine. I was very serious about wine for a while and was a professional wine writer for a while. And living in Louisville as I do, as bourbon started to become less of a commodity and more of a higher end specialty beverage, I sort of drifted into bourbon in a kind of formal way, and it holds for me many of the same attractions as wine, and it's really cool because 95% of it is local. So it's a little bit like living in wine country.
This is Robert. I came to, I grew up in somewhat of a European household. My father is from South Africa, and my lineage goes back to the Boers that fought the British in the Boer War. So I come from some hardy stock. And I was taught to appreciate wine at a very early age. I was about 3 feet tall. Of course, they diluted my wine with a lot of water at the time, which is probably pretty good. And then I began exploring Scotch after many years of collecting wine. Then I moved to Kentucky, moved to Louisville, and you can't get away from bourbon here. And it just my palate evolved, and bourbon is just a wonderful thing. And I'm glad I came to it, started learning about it, and really wanted to know about spirits. It's always been a passion of mine. So I took some classes and became a certified executive bourbon steward with the Stave and Thief Society, which is located here in Louisville, and went on to get my certification in spirits, as well as Tom and I are both certified with the Wine and Spirits Education Trust in out of Europe.
Well, awesome. So
nice.
One of the so you guys work for or you run Aroma Academy, and the tagline is sensory training for drinks professionals, or maybe you should call it sensory training for drinking professionals. I don't know what the better tagline is there, right?
We like to actually say that our graduates smell better.
Yeah, there you go.
Nice.
So talk about what is Aroma Academy.
Aroma Academy was developed about 12 years ago by this really mad scientist in Scotland. He's a perfumer by trade, and his name is Dr. George Dodd, and he's a Scotch enthusiast. He really started the Aroma Academy to explore the science of flavor and the sense of smell. And he realized that people especially in the wine industry and all over, really have never trained their nose, their sense of smell. Everybody trains you're taught to feel as a child. You're taught to touch. Your mother holds you. You touch things. You feel things. You're taught to observe. You're taught to see. You're taught to listen. And you're taught to taste. But tasting is really not that much about taste. It's more about flavor. And your tongue is a blunt instrument. Your tongue can recognize 5 flavors. It can recognize sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and umami. Everything else is aroma. 95% of your ability to discern specific flavors comes from your sense of smell. A very small portion comes from your actual tongue. Dr. Dodd created Aroma Academy and created the aroma kits, and subsequently developed curriculums for training your sense of smell. The kits actually are comprised of 24. We've got both 12 and 24 quantity aromas that are very specific aromas that relate specifically to one spirit. And what you do is you take a perfumer's strip You dip it in the aroma, because the aromas are stabilized in alcohol so that they can keep for upwards of 3 years or more. You let the alcohol dissipate a little bit, and then you smell the aroma, and you connect it with the word. So vocabulary is critical in this situation. You've got vanilla, you smell it, you say the word vanilla, and if you do that over time and you use the kits, you're going to be able to recognize that in a drink. A drink is really a complete and complex compound. And try and get under the alcohol when you're smelling it and really identify the individual notes is very difficult. To deconstruct a beverage is hard. I mean, you said it yourself. Hey, it smells great, it smells like vanilla, let's drink it, Well, there's more than just smelling it. There's actually, when you taste it on the tongue, it's evaporating and your nose is getting a lot of the flavor as well. So you're tasting it both with your tongue and your nasal, your olfactory system at the same time. If you hold your nose and try and eat something, you're not going to taste much flavor. You've had your nose stuffed up, and you've been sick sometime when you couldn't breathe through your nose. You also notice that you can't taste anything. Nothing tastes great at the time. It's because your olfactory senses are so critical to your ability to discern flavor.
If I could jump in here for a second, one of the theories of the Aroma Academy training is that rather than taking, Robert used the word deconstruct, rather than taking the complex nose of a bourbon, which has many aromas in it, what we do is we teach people to recognize a single aroma, whether it's vanilla, which is the most common in bourbon, or tart green apple, which is a little rarer and very subtle to pick up. And when you meet those aromas and get to know those aromas as individuals, it becomes a lot easier to pick them out of the crowd that is the nose of the bourbon. We have this experience all the time in our training where we use apple as an example, where people, we love to ask them if anybody notices apple in the bourbon nose, and almost nobody ever does. Then we put them through the training with the strip of the green apple aroma, and we go back and forth between the bourbon and the apple and the bourbon and the apple. And by the end of the session, people are able to pick the apple out as an individual aroma. And so that's the theory, is you're doing it one aroma at a time. And
you build up the individual notes into a complete flavor profile. Tom likes to say you pick that person out of the crowd. It's a lot like meeting somebody for the first time. You smell the aroma, you say the word, then the next time you see them in a crowd, you can pick, you know them immediately.
With these different test strips and the way that these that you're teaching now, are the smells going to be common between everybody? Like it's a test, like it's like name the 5 smells that are in here, or is it kind of like what do you get out of it? Like, do I smell like chocolate cherries where somebody else doesn't smell that?
Well, that's the precise key to the training program. When you train yourself with these, they've trained thousands of professionals in Europe, Asia, and the UK. They've trained thousands of professionals to do this, and when one of those professionals smells vanilla and says vanilla, the other guy knows what he's talking about. By training with these kits, even though everybody's sense of smell is different, you're smelling an aroma of apple, and you're saying apple, and the person that has also been trained looks at you and says, yeah, I get that. They may be smelling the apple differently because their olfactory system is different, but you're going to be able to have a consistent vocabulary. It's really about a shared experience. One of the stories I like to tell, when I was at a wine tasting, and it was a very famous sommelier. She had a show on PBS, and she had us tasting a white wine, and she said, "Okay, close your eyes. You're in a field of tall grass." We're kind of like, "Okay, we're with you." The grass is damp. It's autumn. We were still with her. Wild horses run past you, and there she stopped. So we kind of smelled the white wine and tasted it and thought, we didn't know what the hell she was talking about, basically.
You're like, is this a meditation, Buddhist meditation camp?
But she had that experience. I'm sure that white wine tasted exactly like wild horses running through a wet field for her. But because we didn't have the shared experience, we had no idea what she was talking about. By saying apple and being trained in apple from the kit, then if you were trained, I would say apple, and you'd say, yeah, I get that, because you're smelling that apple. You're smelling that individual note.
That makes sense. Now
Yeah.
I feel like next time I go out with Ryan, we're going to be like, all right, it smells like I'm in a freshly cut lawn. I have puppies running all over me.
and fertilizer. It is funny you say that, because like I'll taste a bourbon and then I'll look it up, on Distiller or any other publication that does reviews, and it's like you look for what they say they notice, and then you kind of notice it too after the fact. Like at first taste, you're like, oh, that's good, and then you read about the description, you're like, oh, I do see that, or I do taste that.
Precisely.
That's not just the power of suggestion. When someone says they get something and you go back into it and find it yourself. Each of us is differently sensitized. Someone may be able to pick something up really easily that would be much more subtle for you. And so when they say, oh, I smell this, and you haven't yet, now you have something to go look for. Again, the kind of training that we do is take that general principle and make it methodical. We have 24 aromas that we train people on. There are obviously many more aromas than that in the vast range of bourbons that are on the market now. But those are the 24 key aromas. If you get 24 of those, or let's be realistic, if you can get to the point where you've got 10 or 12 of those that you can pick up with a snap of a finger, you're doing pretty well. You're going to be a rock star taster.
So we've talked about vanilla and green apple. So what are some of those other key aromas that people usually kind of want to find in your strips? Because when I smell a lot of stuff, I always pick up a lot of notes of cherry, sometimes chocolate, and of course like vanilla, maybe some kind of like nuttiness.
Hot tamales for me.
That's a new one.
Yeah, but you need to maybe adjust your bourbon selection.
Yeah.
You're gonna have caramel. You're gonna have butterscotch, brown spices, cherry, like you said, cocoa. You're gonna notice the corn, the aroma of corn underneath there, leather, malt, maple syrup, tobacco, orange peel. Citrus of some kind. You're obviously gonna notice the oak and the vanilla. Vanilla is almost in everything, because it's the wonderful thing about vanilla is it is something that is so comforting to everybody. Everybody loves it, and there's a really base reason why, and it goes back to when we were infants. Vanilla is one of the key aromas in mother's milk. So if you were, and they put it in Similac too. So if you weren't breastfed, you are still gonna be comforted by the aroma of vanilla in anything, because you're so it was the first thing the first comfort you had, and one of the first experiences you had ever in this world. So
My home's filled with vanilla. I just had twins, so
there you go. There you go.
I'll start picking up on that.
Between that and Yankee Candles.
Yeah.
That's right.
If you go to our website, which is aromaacademy.us, we have not just the bourbon kit. The bourbon training is brand new. It's actually not out yet. It's going to be
The shipment is just set up to come from the UK. We're awaiting it any day now.
We have gin. We have some other things and some more stuff coming out. But you can go to the website and read the whole list of all the aromas. It's really very interesting, the process that we go through to pick out what are the key aromas and what will best express the full range of a drink category.
Yeah, when we were working on the bourbon kit, we had to pick from 9 samples of butterscotch.
Wow.
Wow.
You must have a really refined nose to be able to do that, because there's just no way.
Well, and it's all about training. Tom and I have been nosing wines for most of our lives, and once I got into Scotch, the same thing. All the peaty, leathery, sweet, and smoky. I mean, and then moving on to bourbon, bourbon is just. Of course, we live in Louisville, Kentucky, so we're a little biased, but
And not everybody is as good at it as some people are. Robert is significantly better at it than I am. I don't have a really well developed nose. But even if you're not some kind of freak the way Robert is, you can latch on to 5 or 6 things that you can get, and they can be your guide as you sample bourbons and then figure out what you're going to like and what you should try next, and where you should put your investment dollars. Even if you just get a few of the aromas down, it really does help guide your exploration.
Now, since you guys have a lot of history in this, has there ever been a bourbon, scotch, or wine that you've nosed and then you've said, nope, I'm not even going to try to drink that?
More times I'd like to care to mention.
Some KT.
And it doesn't happen with whiskey, but it certainly happens with wine.
You're talking to someone who has in his liquor cabinet mushroom-infused vodka.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
So my standards are let's call them broad.
I was about to say that totally beats the sort of cotton candy flavored vodka you usually see on some shelves.
It's really good in Bloody Marys. We haven't found another.
I can imagine.
There's another kind of a funny thing you all did on your blog when you talked about creating, I guess you'd say, like a nosing sample of Pappy Van Winkle. Can you talk about that a little bit?
When the Scotch kit was developed, it's actually a whiskey kit, which is geared to Scotch and Irish whiskey, because the guys that developed it are Scottish. But they put together a whole list of Scotch. They actually have the different numbers of the aromas that you put together. You take the aroma strips and you dip them in each of the aromas that they have listed. And they did one for us up in Chicago right off the cuff and nailed Talisker. Just nailed it. I mean, instantly they brought out the Talisker flavor profile with 4 strips that were dipped in aromas. And anybody that you waved it in front of that's familiar with Talisker knew exactly what it was. Yeah, we're developing that for bourbons, and we've got a list that we're putting together, and that list will be on the website that accompanies the bourbon kit. So it's actually somewhat interactive as well, and we're making it even more so because each of the kits comes with an activation code, and you sign onto the website, and there will be interactive content, and we'll be updating that content on a regular basis so that people will be able to put their if they've developed a flavor profile for a specific bourbon like Michter's Toasted, they'll be able to put it up on the website, and everybody will be able to look at that and reproduce it.
So I guess with that, I mean, have you found, and let's leave a rye out of this, but have you found like 2 particular brands of bourbon that are just completely like polar opposites of one another?
We like to contrast high rye versus wheated bourbons when we're doing our introductory event. What we do is we pull and typically we use Old Forester 86, and we use either Old Fitzgerald or Makers as the wheated. That, of course, Old Forester is rye. Mm-hmm. And it's a nice contrast because you can see the difference in the pepper, the level of pepper that's underlying it, the difference in the spices underlying it. Because that rye whiskey, high rye whiskey, which is most common, is always going to have that underlying peppery flavor, depending on how large the portion of it is in the mash bill. And the wheated is just not going to have as much spice because those congeners are kind of are just not there or de-emphasized in the wheated.
So another question for you all is, if somebody goes and purchases one of your kits, like, is it like a 24-hour turnaround time? They're like, all right, I've got my senses down, or is it just like it's a continual involvement and a continual training? And I guess how long does it really take to kind of go through that kit and really start thinking like, what's the usual turnaround time that you really start developing a better sense of knowing exactly what you are smelling?
You can ramp up. It's like any other kind of learning. You can ramp up very quickly to a level of proficiency that is fairly impressive. We do a 2-hour introduction that basically enables people to to dissect the 5 basic areas of the flavor wheel. The real long-term value of it is the ability, if the value were just the training session, you could come to the training session and go on with your life. But people take the kits because they want to continue their exploration. And when you go somewhere and taste 10 or 12 or 20 bourbons, you need to reorient yourself. Your palate sort of loses track of itself after a while, and everything blends into a big mush. And we're in conversations right now with a couple of bourbon contests who are thinking about using portions of what we do for the judges to reorient their noses in the middle of the contests, in the middle of the competitions. It's a lot of fun with a group of people to just stand around and pull out different aromas and try them and see if you can guess what they are and find them in the drink. But it really should be an ongoing process. That's why we sell kits instead of just training. And there's an extensive book that comes with the kit that helps you through the process and understanding the significance of what you're smelling. And it can be goofy fun.
You can become proficient very quickly. You can actually start noticing the flavors almost immediately once you start using the bourbon kit. Some of the flavors are more subtle. Some of them will dissipate more quickly than others. It really is an ongoing education process. You can become as proficient as you want to be. But if you use one of these every day for a week and just spend an hour recognizing the aromas and going through the aromas each day, you can be an absolute rock star, like Tom said, in a week's time. But it really is a lifelong learning kit. There's enough of the solution of each aroma that it'll last you for. I mean, you can't train yourself out of. You will not run out of the aromas. Unless you're training yourself and several of your friends.
Do aromas change with the type of, let's just say you actually have a glass of bourbon, and this was actually something that we had, one of a past guests that we had on the show, and she put something out there that Marion Bard's actually put out there, and she said that aromas will change because of density levels and stuff like that, depending upon the type of glass you have your bourbon in. So is there kind of any kind of truth to that? Like, is there the way that the aromas sit or the chemical balance of it that could possibly change the way a bourbon smells?
Absolutely. The type of glassware you use is going to change the way that the aromas. Part of it is that it changes the way the alcohol dissipates. There's a new glass coming out that has a Kickstarter attached to it, and they've reached their capacity, so they're in production on their first run. And I'm not going to mention it because I'm not sure what our issue might be. And
no, there's no issue at all. But no, I actually saw that same exact Kickstarter, and it's got like this like vortex-looking glass and whatever, right? So
exactly. Exactly. Now you've got standard Glencairn glasses. You've got different sizes of Glencairn. The little Glencairn glasses, the kind of the standard Glencairn, it's great for sipping out of, and it's great for drinking. But the bigger cocktail Glencairn is probably a better glass for tasting and nosing bourbons and whiskeys of any kind, because that allows the alcohol to dissipate and go out of the glass, and you'll get the underlying flavor notes.
With that, getting the alcohol to dissipate, that's what a lot of people, they say, when you pour a bourbon, you've got to let it air out a little bit. So kind of talk about a little bit about that. I know we're hitting to the top of the hour, but I kind of I have these burning questions I want to ask. So kind of talk about, letting something air out to let some of that alcohol dissipate so you can really get those better aromas out of some bourbon.
Everything is going to evolve over time. There are aromas that are more volatile, and there are aromas that are less volatile, and the alcohol is the most volatile thing typically in a glass of whiskey. So all that is going to evaporate at different rates. And if you pour a glass of scotch or pour a glass of bourbon and let it sit there for a while, it's going to taste different an hour from now than it tastes immediately, and it's going to taste much different 24 hours from now. And the key to that is just evaporation and the volatility of each of the aromas. We could go into the science of it and talk about it all day long, but it's quite boring and quite mind-numbing. So
another important point is you've heard us talk about the aroma strips, which are or the perfumer's paper strips. That's specially constructed paper that not only doesn't have its own aroma, but that when you dip it into the aromatic acid and let it sit, it mimics the change in aroma over the course of slowly sipping a glass of bourbon. That change that Robert was talking about happens in the perfumer's strips as well. So that when you first smell the aroma strip, it's going to smell one way. When you come back to it 10 minutes later, it's going to smell differently.
So I know we're reaching the top. I want to talk about lastly, if you want to get the kits and kind of go on your own journey and start learning it. That's awesome, but I also want you to talk about some of because you guys also host some classes, right? So you can actually get there in person and sort of have a hands-on relationship and understand exactly firsthand what you're doing. Because I think, at least for me, I learn much better in a classroom setting than I do trying to watch online video tutorials or read a book or something like that.
Especially if in the classroom setting someone is pouring you bourbon.
Yes, much easier, right?
We have single spirits classes, and each of our events is typically spirit specific. So we do bourbon events, we do Scotch events, Scotch and Irish whiskey events, we do a gin event, and we do wine events. And soon we'll be doing a rum event because we have a rum kit coming out, which is going to be interesting. I know this isn't a rum podcast, but when all of that rum starts flowing out of Cuba after it opens up, you're going to find some really interesting flavors. Regardless, we do a 2-hour introductory session for individual spirits or a wine session, and we also do 1-day individual single spirit classes. We're currently working on our first quarter 2016 schedule. We expect to have several classes we're targeting Chicago, Columbus, and Louisville currently for January and or early February, and then our schedule will be available on the website.
There's sort of two ways that we do that. One way is we have a class and people come in for their professional advancement, and the other way, and we've done this a couple of times now, is that a bar or a restaurant that is trying to build a bourbon program has us come in and do staff training for them. So there are events that are both kind of open to the public, and then people who book us privately to come in and just talk to their staff.
Well, that's awesome. I can totally see that being a huge driver. I think the first thing that they need to figure out on some of those menus for these places that become they're trying to be whiskey bars or whatever, they've got to take Jack Daniels off the bourbon list.
Yes.
Wow, you had to go there, didn't you?
Yeah, I had to. Kentucky native. I gotta go ahead and fly my flag.
I have no argument with that.
So, Tom and Robert, I want to say first off, thank you for being on the show today. It was a pleasure talking about all these things because this is something that I feel I'm very novice to, and at least with the aroma side, I want to be able to learn more, and you can definitely count me in on trying to learn more, and probably getting one of those kits as well. But if people do want to buy kits and they want to find you online, how do they do that?
aromaacademy.us. When you go in, there's it's just a regular old website. There's a shop button. If you want to get complicated about it, you can go to aromaacademy.us/bourbon1, which will tell you specific information about the bourbon kit itself. As I said, the bourbon kit is brand new. We're starting kind of curriculum development on that. We've done 5 or 6, or I don't know what the number is, training sessions with bourbon, and are tweaking the curriculum to get the right balance. We're getting really good feedback on it. But we have all the other things, and we do try to make our website interesting and entertaining. You can also follow us. We are at Aroma Academy US on Twitter. And Aroma Academy US has a page on Facebook. Again, we try to add some entertainment value to things, but we also are publishing information about where our training is available. And we will be announcing our schedule for early next year in next couple of weeks. So I think that's probably more information than you wanted, but
no, it's perfect. Yeah,
I've worked for a long time, and I'm used to getting paid by the word.
One final note: we are having a pre-order sale on our bourbon kit. We're guaranteeing delivery by December 15th. If you order before Repeal Day, which is the 5th, December 5th, and we're offering 20% off of the bourbon kits during that time period.
Oh man, now the rush is on us to get this. Go ahead and post this the next 2 days then.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll figure something out for your listeners, and we'll let you know. You can put it up on your website. We'll get them a coupon code or something so they can carry that through for a few extra days if the air date of this is.
That's fantastic. Yeah, just have them. You follow these guys on Twitter and then send them a direct message, and then they can probably give you a coupon code or something like that.
Absolutely.
Well, great.
For sure.
Well, awesome, Tom and Robert. Again, thank you for joining the podcast. This has been really enlightening, in my opinion. So, Ryan, close us out.
That was really awesome. When I drink bourbon or wine or food or just sit down for a good meal, I like to zone out and really focus on the flavors and the smells, and I lack that knowledge and I guess vocabulary of what I'm looking for. So I think this would be a really cool thing to get for somebody that's into bourbon or anything, in food or, spirits. I think you would really enjoy a product like this to kind of keep exploring, these products and discovering, what's in the quality and so forth. So I really appreciate your time and stuff.
Yeah, it's one thing to buy a nice bottle of bourbon. It's the other thing to actually understand and get those flavors out of it so you can really enjoy it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
appreciating it or enjoying it, absolutely. And thank you very much for having us.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So if you like what you hear, make sure you subscribe to us on iTunes. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And you can review and listen to old podcasts on our website at bourbonpursuit.com.
Please keep giving us feedback and suggestions for shows. That's kind of how we got this one. The past few we've gotten from suggestions. So just keep that coming, and we appreciate y'all listening. We'll see you next time.
This episode of the Bourbon Pursuit podcast is brought to you in partnership with thewhiskeywash.com, a lifestyle website for news and reviews for people who like whiskey and for those who think that a life without whiskey has no style. Thewhiskeywash.com.